What's good, YouTube? Week 33 MLS action coming your way here this weekend. We got a 14-game slate. Most teams only have 5 games remaining, and the only team eliminated so far is the Earthquakes. So that tells you everything you need to know about just how sort of ridiculous the MLS playoff format is, that there's still this many teams still in the running for these final playoff spots in each conference, and as well as specifically in the East, just how kind of poor that conference is once you get from the top 4 down, because a lot of teams have really been tripping over themselves and not really separating themselves in terms of who wants that last home playoff spot, who even wants the playoffs. And there was a lot of action in the past week. I know we missed out on week 32 for the video, but in the meantime, last weekend for week 31, we had El Trafico, Hell is Real. Hell is Real didn't deliver, 0-0 for I think maybe the second time ever in that derby's history. But then later on, we had El Trafico and the Galaxy coming back from 2-0 down at half to beat LAFC and separate themselves in that first place in the West and getting revenge on them after LAFC beat them twice earlier. Insane comeback, specifically because LAFC as well is just so suited to holding on to those leads. I don't think they had even lost a game this season when scoring the first goal and leading at half. And so just an insane events there, insane goals in that game. And that out of those two derbies is really the one that has always delivered. And yeah, it was just a great way to end off that weekend. And then we had the midweek action recently, which we didn't cover, but we did well with our bets on. And Galaxy actually slipped up because they had to go on the road right away to the Timbers, who are one of the hottest teams at home in MLS. Timbers beat them 4-2 in another banger. But that's kind of been the problem for the Galaxy. They're still sitting first in the West, but they're really going to want to hold on to that first seed, because if they have to go on the road, then it's going to get probably a little scary for them. You know, they have not lost a single home game this season. And, you know, it's really all about that home field advantage. These, especially the Galaxy, they kind of give away the ball a lot sometimes. And if they slip up in the playoffs where they go down, specifically on the road, then we still haven't really seen them shown that consistency in terms of pulling off result after result. And in the playoffs, those tensions are just going to be that much higher. And then LAFC continuing their poor rut with another draw, more points lost at home to Austin after that El Trafico loss. Insane, because Austin also didn't have Driussi, their star number 10, and there's even some issues with him kind of reposting stuff about that he might be alluding to the fact that he wants to leave, and fans kind of getting at him on Twitter, and he's been retweeting that type of stuff. So not the best situation there as well, but Austin finds a way to get that draw. And then Cincy goes on the road, beats Minnesota 2-1. Nashville now with back-to-back wins. They beat Atlanta last weekend, and now the Fire 1-0 at home. Fire slipping up once again. What is new? This is the life of a Fire fan, and yet they are still in it with 5 games to go. And then Miami going on the road to Atlanta, trying to get revenge, but they rested a lot of their players, including Messi, Suarez, Busquets, and even more rotation than that. Those guys, the stars, came on around an hour into the match. They went up 2-1, and then those stars came on. It was literally, the midfield did not exist in that game. It was just literally back and forth like 5-on-5s with the attack against the back lines, and Atlanta just ends up scoring with Moranchuk's first ever goal for the club, an absolute banger to tie it, and then Suarez missing basically a tap, and nothing could separate the sides, and Miami drops points, but they're still obviously in pole position for that Shield race, should be all but theirs, and they're still obviously at the same time going for the points record, which is the new record, if they get it, would be 74, unless they want to tie it at 73. So once again, it's coming down to the wire. A lot of teams still left in this playoff race, and another loaded 14-game slate, 13 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday, and we're going to cover them all with more best bets. We're up almost 17 units on this season in terms of the betting aspects, and the midweek slate treated us nicely. The last weekend slate, the last video we did was so-and-so. The 2-unit missed, but we're looking to stay strong off the midweek form. And I have another 2-unit in this one, including 4 best bets for the show. So we're going to go over every match, who's in, who's out. There's obviously going to be a lot more rotation probably, with most teams playing 3 games in 8 days. So let's just get into the Week 33 slate. So NYCFC hosts Miami at Yankee Stadium. They get to stay at home after their midweek game, and they got bounced by the Union out of all teams, who are kind of picking up in form here, and now they're in those final playoff spots. But regardless, they got bounced 5-1. And just not good signs for this team that is now 2 draws and 2 losses after Leagues Cup. And they're just really fortunate that the teams around them are slipping up. No one seems to want to secure these final playoff spots, like Charlotte, New York, Toronto. Like, no one around them is really improving as much. Orlando has already skyrocketed now after their terrible start, obviously, and they're sitting in that 4th and final home playoff spot. So Burke Reese has been injured for a couple games. That's a key loss for them on that back line. And Miami on the other end, coming off that 2-2 draw like we talked about to Atlanta. They have to continue their travels here, but they rotated so much at Atlanta that I think the main guys should be going here. You would think they kind of just chose which one to rest for. But the other problem is that, NYC is playing at this baseball stadium, this unique kind of terrible field conditions. So it's really about, how much are they going to risk those same players as well, such as Messi, even though he may be healthy. So this one's a lineup check for me as well, especially with the, how much these teams, the 3 games in 8 days type of thing. But my hunch is that Miami will go pretty strong regardless, or at least, obviously they've been getting so many results without Messi and going to win the Shield part mainly due to, without Messi being in there for most of the season. So it's not really only about Messi, but the point is that I think the main guys surrounding him, who were rotated regardless, will go for this one. And that's really enough because NYC hasn't been consistent. They're really slipping up now. And although they did draw Miami earlier on in the season at Miami, I just feel like Miami, it's very hard to come by that they drop points in consecutive games. So this one just feels like Miami, they're chasing that shield. They will almost it would take a collapse for them not to get it, but they're also chasing that points record. And I think after that performance, especially where the guys came on with a lead at Atlanta and then couldn't even secure that lead or put the game away, they're gonna have some fire under their bellies. So I'm gonna go for Miami to get this one and get back in the win column. I say 3-1. Charlotte also not looking too good right now. Just 1 draw and 3 losses coming out of Leagues Cup. And the attack just really hasn't been meshing despite the signing of Pep Biel, having Abada healthy, and now Aguimang finally back into the mix in that most recent Orlando match at striker, but still nothing doing. Shutout again to Orlando 2-0. The good thing is they're only 5 points out of that 4th spot, so it's still possible, but you have to make the most of games like these. This is the last place team in the East they're facing in the Revs, and they're at home where they're obviously been pretty locked down, and the Revs themselves just gave up a 2-0 lead at home to Montreal, who they beat 5-0 on the road. So obviously that just tells you they're not a good team, and that's why they're 15th in the East. But obviously they still have 6 games left and a pretty favorable schedule, so probably besides this game. But the Revs attacking wise have definitely improved, but still just too many mental lapses. And Charlotte, this will be one where they really need to turn it around, and I do expect them to do so. Revs with the worst attacking output, expected goals numbers on the road in the entire league, and tied for the worst expected goals allowed in general. So you would think if Charlotte turns it around, it has to be here, or else their prospects for, the kind of 5th, 4th are really, really looking slim. So I'm going to trust Charlotte to get it done. New England still has more games in hand and very much of a chance to still make a run. But I don't think it starts here. I'm going to say Charlotte gets this one done 2-0. Two very low teams in the East going at it, and the watchability rating is teetering literally in the balance here at 50% because, one, there's the rotation involved, and two, you really just literally cannot know what to expect out of either one of these teams. Montreal looked dead in the water, and then they come back against the Revs to earn themselves a very crucial point. Every point matters at this stage, and they find themselves in 13th. The Fire get a late win over Red Bulls on the weekend, and then they go to Nashville, who before beating Atlanta was 8 straight losses, and they get shut out and lose. Hugo Kuipers had a baby during the time, so he missed out on the Nashville match. His first game missed for the club, and they really missed him clearly. And then Brian Gutierrez did return from a bit of an injury to feature in the game, so that's good for the Fire's prospects here. But they have basically one less game than most of these other teams in this bottom barrel of the East and in this playoff race, and they're also, not ahead of points on anyone. They're tied with New England, and everyone else has more points on them. So literally, it has to be a win-out mentality from this point forward. Montreal is obviously very, very vulnerable, but the Fire literally only have 2 wins on the road this season. One was at Cincy, and the other I can't recall. But they clearly have an upset in them, if possible. The other one was Toronto. And so, if you could beat Cincy on the road, then, but still, it's not probable, but it's also not probable that Montreal pulls it off, because obviously both these defenses are very unreliable, and then also Chico's Chicago's best center back has been dealing with injuries the past couple of games. So while you would think this tends to lead to goals, this could be a little bit cagey because of the way the points are positioned, and neither attack has looked too impressive. So it's hard to call this one. As a suffering Fire fan, I'm going to be optimistic, but the team has had to travel now 2 straight games from Nashville to Montreal. It's not like Montreal stayed home, but I think both these teams just are going to shoot themselves in the foot, and if anything, maybe one gets a late winner, but I think it's just so hard to trust the Fire on the road that I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. The Crew hosting Orlando, 3rd versus 4th in the East, but 10 points separating these teams. So you would really think that those top 3 spots are all but locked up. And it's really just about Columbus versus Cincy, who gets that 2nd spot. And Orlando obviously picking up some crazy form, mostly on the back of their home form. And they've really beat up on the bad teams in the East, which is, they're doing the business there. But this was really the first time recently now, this past Wednesday, midweek, that they beat and convincingly beat a kind of team in the playoff spots in Charlotte 2-0. So much more impressive in that performance. They've really found their flow, especially attacking wise. Muriel hasn't even been really involved or starting. He's been coming off the bench. Duncan Maguire has also been sort of benched for the most part. He's been coming on. He scored in the last game against Charlotte to make it 2-0, but they've been making things work with Enrique Ojeda, Facundo Torres. Like, that's just been their front kind of line, and they have those depth kind of striker options who normally would be starting for them, but that's just how it's played out. And they've been posting a lot of clean sheets lately, especially at home during this run, but there's just a very steep drop-off between those top 3 in the East and literally everyone else. I think Orlando, when it's said and done, is going to hold on to this 4th spot. But here is just a spot where the Crew specifically, they rotated very heavily for that Toronto match midweek, and Cucho came on at halftime for Rossi. So both those attackers only played 45 minutes. And I don't even think Ramirez played. If he did, he was subbed down super late. And so not too much energy was expended. And so they're back home here, where obviously you can't really think of a bad result at home for the Crew this season, besides recently, which was that Sounders game, which was under extreme circumstances with all those players out for the break. And then obviously your one goalie gets a red, so you have to put a midfielder in goal. That's just one you just put to the side. Orlando, to their credit, has been, I think, if not the best, the second best team in terms of their output, or in terms of their expected goals allowed numbers on the road all season. So if this were another matchup, they've been very respectable on the road in terms of the lack of chances they're allowing. But I think there's just too steep of a difference here, and I think the Crew are gonna show out and just continue their good form. They were definitely disappointed by that draw in Hell is Real, because they were the better team for the most part and missed some pretty ridiculously simple chances. So they want to get that second spot in case they have to meet Cincy in the playoffs, and they would rather host them, since they had to go through a pretty tough road gauntlet, including Orlando in the playoffs last season, to beat them and then end up becoming MLS champs. So best bet number one, haven't even mentioned it, but it's been up here. Crew money line and over 1.5. Would I be surprised if Orlando scores here? No, but I think Crew, this is one of those teams you just can't hold out from scoring, and I think it takes 2 to win here most likely. We could take the both to score, but I also don't know what to get from Orlando on the road. I think they've been too comfortable at home, and I think this might be a little bit of a reality check for them in terms of the difference in quality. But I still think we expected Orlando to be in kind of around this area at the start of the season. They just didn't start out that way at all. So props to them, but I will be fading them here. We're taking the better team, who rotated midweek and should be going a little bit more full strength than probably this Orlando City side will, with also Araujo in midfield out for them. So that will be a key loss. Red Bulls had a bye during the midweek, along with St. Louis and DC, who we'll get to, but they get to stay at home here. And Atlanta, coming off that emotional 2-2 draw versus Miami, and it's really been like, as the commentators were saying, if you're watching that game, is where's that energy, where's that drive, this whole season, this whole type of the whole game, specifically against Miami, because Miami for that game heavily rotated, and they still got out to the lead, took the lead twice. Atlanta had to come back twice to get a point in that game, but you could just tell in the end like how much passion and just forwardness, directness that Atlanta was playing in, and they do have some talented pieces, obviously, including Moranchuk and Saba, to be, taking on defenses like that. And so it's really just about putting the pieces together. They're obviously rebuilding for next season, but there's still the potential to make the playoffs here. And 4 games left. They're only 1 point out. Right now, that's how tight it is. Union are 9th with 33 points, and Montreal 13th with 31. That's 2 points separating five teams. So everything's still in the balance. We say this week by week, because no one is really picking up crucial points besides now the Union, who just got that win over NYCFC. But anyways, back to this game. Red Bulls have just been absolutely horrendous without Forsberg since he got that foot injury. It's 2 wins, 10 draws, and 3 losses in the past 15 games. Forsberg only played one of those games for a total of 4 minutes. So they've been draw FC for the most part. The production just hasn't been there. Part of that during that stretch was the international break for a couple games without Morgan. But really, it's been the same old story. They've been fading out. They make the playoffs like every year but get rounded. And so unless Forsberg comes back, it just seems like it's going to be the same kind of ending to the season for Red Bulls, who were in that prime 4th spot but are now slipping up to Orlando. So Forsberg's still kind of definitely not ready for this match. Not really sure how much longer he's going to be out, because it's just been kept in the shadows. But Atlanta, with a prime opportunity, they have played some very good kind of counterattacking and kind of defensive-minded football on the road this season. They've had some really good results. They've held teams to minimal chances and kind of stolen some games late. You think of Charlotte at Miami, and so they are capable of getting an upset here against a side like New York, who really is one of those teams that will be desperate and really is lacking ideas. So if Atlanta just stays patient here, I can see them pulling off an upset. And yeah, but I think coming off that win or coming off that comeback to draw, you kind of do have to make the most of it. And this could be at least a crucial point here in a road match that you're probably not favored in, but there's definitely this Red Bull team has definitely been weakened. So I'm gonna go for an upset here. I'm gonna say Atlanta squeaks this one out 2-1. I'm gonna trust them, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a draw. I just don't really see it from Red Bulls right now. And Moranchuk got off the mark. I see him influencing and putting his mark on this team a little bit more towards the end of the season. Yeah, so I say 2-1 to Atlanta. A Texas derby here between Austin and Dynamo. 10 points separating these teams. Austin on the outside looking in right now for the playoffs. They have 5 games left. They just got a crucial point at LAFC, a place that they don't win in often. They don't get results on the road often. But they were without Driussi for that game. And as we talked about, there's kind of some drama there. He was reposting stuff during the game talking about fan posts that were talking about that he himself should go and leave the club, and that Wolf should be fired. So I'm not sure if he was doing that to troll or if he agrees, but he retweeted and liked those posts. So clearly I don't think his head's in the right place to kind of lead this team down the stretch. The energy around this team is kind of fading as well, despite that draw. I'm just haven't been high on this team at all ever, if you've kept up with the show. But somehow in this matchup, these two teams have played twice this season. Austin's won both by a 1-0 scoreline. Dynamo, once again, same old story. They kind of get out of their funk at home to win against RSL in a bloodbath, and then they stay at home midweek versus the Whitecaps, have them basically hanging onto dear life. They're up 1-0, and then they let them back in the game. Brian White comes back from his concussion protocol, subs in, ties the game minutes later, ends 1-1. So more points dropped for the Dynamo. And, despite the fact they're in 7th right now, they're only 2 points out from Colorado with 47 points. So Rapids, Sounders on 47, Whitecaps on 46, Dynamo on 45. They do have a game in hand on one of those teams, but it's really about who takes it now. And I think Dynamo are the better team here by all accounts, but Austin has been pulling some results out of the hat, especially at home where they're a little bit better. They're getting Heinz ZK back as well in defense, and this one's just hard to call. It's going to be definitely emotional, definitely blazing hot in Texas. And I think with Hector Herrera's injury as well for the Dynamo, he's going to be missing a couple weeks. That's a key loss for them, but I think attacking-wise, they do have the talent. It's just about the transition and the pace and the energy for this team, which really seems to kind of ebb and flow every game for the Dynamo. So really have to see what the rotation is like in this one, but that's kind of why, once again, for some of these games especially, I'm avoiding bets if it's not a clear look, because this is one of those where anything can happen. Austin's had their number somehow this season, but I'm still going to go with the Dynamo to get this one 2-1. Dallas hosts LAFC. Both of these teams dropping points midweek. Dallas lost to RSL on the road. They have to come all the way back home here on obviously the short rest. LAFC coming all the way back out to Texas. They've been literally back and forth. They went to the Dynamo, then came back for a couple games. Now they're back here. Not the best scheduling, but that's what they're faced with in the midst of, I think, a 4-game winless run in all competitions. So not a good look for LAFC currently. They're not really a team that rotation really matters for, and Bawanga, and Giroud have been playing basically every game. Especially they've gotten some players back. Lewis O'Brien was on the red card for the midweek game, so he'll be back here fully fit. You would expect him to go. But Dallas home form has been very, very respectable. 8 wins, 2 draws, 4 losses. So that's been the crux of their kind of points this entire season. And they're sitting 11th in the West. Still very possible for them to get in, but they do have to, make up ground on Minnesota, who is currently on 39 points in that final 9 spot. So the games are running thin. But the good thing for Dallas is that everyone's healthy. Velasco's been featuring much, much more after a couple very short bench appearances. And Pereira, Musa, everyone else is good to go. It's just about if they rotate for this. But this is really not a time to be rotating, especially for these teams, especially who are not in comfortable positions and really need the points. So LAFC on the road, hard to call. It's been a lot of travel for them recently, just like I said, back and forth. And they're obviously desperate to make up ground in the West because they don't want to be below both RSL and Galaxy. They do have the extra games in hand, especially on Galaxy, but they did drop points while Galaxy just dropped points as well after El Trafico. So good thing for the Galaxy, but this could get ugly for LAFC if they don't return back to their form. I think Giroud as well has not particularly been fitting in with the system like I kind of predicted. He's not kind of just this counter-attacking forward. And so he hasn't gotten off the mark as well in MLS play. His one goal was in that Leagues Cup final on a corner kick. So they have to find a way to implement him somehow, or just, I don't know. I mean, Kai Kamara was a pretty good thing for them. But we'll have to see how they adjust, if they can, and if they can make up ground in this top tier of the West. But I think there's goals in this game. It's just whether about, what these squads look like, which is the question for all these games with these teams playing 3 games in 8 days. But I think both of these should be pretty full strength, and Dallas as well is a bottom 8 defense. So even though their home form has been good, I do expect them to allow 1 or 2 here, and that just leaves me to say that the watchability is pretty high, and I think LAFC pulls it out, but I don't see either of these teams keeping the other out with the kind of woeful form both are in. So I'm gonna go for a 3-2 LAFC victory. So there's really not too much to talk about in this one. Nashville back-to-back wins against Atlanta and Chicago after 8 losses in a row, but we still know who this team is, and they're one of the worst attacking teams in the league, devoid of many ideas. Mukhtar has been really at the front of anything positive in these past 2 games, and he just came off the last game with what looked like just literally fatigue, because that's how much he's doing and the effort he's putting in to try and drag this team somehow into the playoffs. And they're literally only 1 point out now after those 2 wins. And that's just insane sometimes how forgiving this league can be with the playoff system, with how many teams get in. And Cincinnati on the other end bounced back from hell is real with a 2-1 win at Minnesota. And Lucho Acosta hasn't even been playing at his peak level. He's been, not at the center of everything like usual. And you have to think that he has to get back into that kind of form down this stretch before the playoffs start, coming back from that injury. And Cincy also looking for revenge here on Nashville. Nashville beat Cincy at Cincy earlier this season. So I think it's hard to see Cincinnati not getting 3 points in this one. The possibility of rotation is always possible, and really, Cincinnati's health has been getting better, and no suspensions as well for the back line. So maybe they can pick it up defensively with those new signings and continue to at least just limit teams from putting up multiple goals on them. And Nashville is one of those that I think they can definitely get by against. And I think Cincinnati does get it done 2-0. So we talked about this exact scenario before last weekend's games when St. Louis was hosting Minnesota, basically saying that they needed that game, St. Louis, because Minnesota is occupying that final playoff spot. And then what does Minnesota do? They steal all 3 points on the road, coming back from 1-0 down. And this is the same position Kansas City finds itself in. They have one less game in hand, and they're down 8 points. So they can still technically be alive with a draw, but it would be asking very much of Minnesota to not get any more points after this game. If they lose, they're out. They're out of the playoff contention, and it's really as simple as that. So Kansas City needs this one. They also have, I forgot to mention this in the LAFC Dallas game, but the Open Cup final is this coming Wednesday after this Saturday slate. So just insane schedule congestion, especially for KC and LAFC. That's going to be hosted by LAFC. So as much as this may be a look-ahead spot for Kansas City, that hasn't really been their mentality. Peter Vermees was talking about, they want to be playing their best soccer ahead of that game and be in high spirits, because as much as this has been a bad season, they've been on a good run of form now, and they just dismantled Rapids 4-1 at home, to really most people's surprise, especially mine, because Rapids as well were one of the best attacking teams as well on the road. So at home they've been surprisingly dominant lately, and this game means a lot. Every game is basically like a final to them. In this case, this is basically one of their last chances to make up ground in that race, or else it's over for them, and really all they have to look forward to is that Open Cup final. So Minnesota, attacking wise, they are top 5 in terms of their away expected goals, but they're also bottom 4 in terms of their away expected goals allowed. So lots of goals probably on the card in this one, but it's hard to trust who's going to come out on top. Kansas City, obviously, with the good home form recently, and Minnesota's DPs and signings in terms of Yeboah Pereira have been playing pretty good. Yeboah now with 3 penalties converted out of 3, and they obviously also have Oluwase if they do have to rotate a little bit. So a little bit better attacking depth for Minnesota, but I think they just know they need a point out of this one, and this could just be a cagey one on top of that because of the positioning situation. So I do see goals still in this match, but I think Minnesota knows a draw is enough. So I'm going to say this one ends 2-2. The Rapids hosting Toronto. Rapids still clinging on to that 4th spot. They've done very well to get themselves in this position and keep themselves there for a couple of game weeks. But this is one of those home games you have to continue and earn your right to host a home playoff game. And this is where my best bet, number 2, lies. This is going to be the 2 unit for the show. And I'm taking the Rapids to win, plus over 1.5 for minus 105. And Rapids, in general, a top 2, top 1, it's very minimal expected goals team production-wise. They're coming off a bad loss on the road to Kansas City. But I think that's, just a slip-up, honestly, not very indicative of the potential of this team, how good this team has been this season, especially at home where they're 9 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses. So they've been pouring on the goals at home as well in that, in those games. And Toronto, on the other hand, 2nd worst expected goals numbers on the road this season. The defense hasn't even held up to that as well. They've been very much slipping. They're still somehow holding out to that 8th spot in the East, but they have 1 less game in hand than most of these teams surrounding them and chasing them. And in the past game, in the loss to Columbus, Insigne, one of their star players, had a hamstring injury. He couldn't carry on, and the coach Herdman in the press conference basically took a dig at him, saying that this is one of those games against the Crew in this time of the season where you're still not securing the playoffs and need to, that this is one of those games where your star players need to find a way to continue and carry on in the game and help you get a point or points in the game. And so he's basically taking a dig at Insigne there because he was forced off. And then one of their key midfielders, Osorio, also got injured late in that game. So that's two key misses. Insigne is really one of the only sparks besides Bernadeschi of that entire attack. And so that's two key valuable players, probably not going to be good for this game on such short notice, you would imagine. And the fact that Toronto has even more schedule congestion and a look-ahead spot this coming Wednesday after this Saturday game is their Canadian Championship final against Vancouver Whitecaps. So they're going to be probably more focused on that as much as they are obviously wanting to make the playoffs. They're still in a decent position because they're still 4 points up on 10th. So this is one that they can, drop, and they probably will drop regardless of if their motivation is there or not. The Rapids are just simply the better team. They've been dominant at home, and players like Fernandez, one of their wingers, their better wingers, I would say, got rotated for the past game. So he's going to be good to go here. Navarro, their striker, usually goes every game for the most part, and Mihailovic as well. So Rapids do have a little bit of some defensive issues. Haven't been the most, compact defensive team. Bombito obviously left, and now Abubakar was out last game because he's been dealing with concussion protocol, and so you would hope he comes back for this one, but that's kind of a case-by-case basis because we saw with Brian White, he missed like 3 games, so hoping he's back. But regardless, they did sign Reggie Cannon, who could help that back line and did feature last game for the first time. So it's not like they're a terrible defensive team, but Toronto as well, one of the worst attacking output numbers in the entire league on the road. So I think this should be a straightforward win for Rapids. There is a bit of a weather concern here, but I'm still going to take this. I think this is one the Rapids have to have, and I think they just beat up on a fading Toronto team without one of its best players and, just minimal talent on this Toronto side, who will probably playing in a sense that they have to earn a point and maybe a little bit more compact. But I see no problems with Rapids, who especially on set pieces, if they need to, have been getting the goals. So they can score in a variety of ways. And I just see them completely running Toronto, off the field at home, as they have been doing to much better opposition as well throughout the season. So that's going to be our 2 unit for the show. So Galaxy first in the West, an emotional win in El Trafico, and they're let down right after that with a bad loss, it has to be said, on the road to Timbers. They let it get out of hand. They had to chase the game again, and you just can't expect to come back from multiple goals down, especially in consecutive games, but just often. And Galaxy, though, get to be back home here, and where they still haven't lost. This is the best home team in the entire league, almost, if not the Crew or Miami, but definitely the best team in the West who haven't lost against actually the best road team in the West in Vancouver, who have 25 points on the road. That's best in the West and 4th best in the entire league behind the top 3 in the East, Miami, Cincy, and Columbus. So interesting. LA Galaxy, their travel and back and forth from home and away recently obviously is not far because they go to Portland and then back to LA. Whitecaps in the meantime, they had to go to Houston midweek where they picked up a draw, and now they have to go all the way back out of the West Coast for this game. So definitely more tired legs for them. But like I said, Brian White comes back from the concussion, plays about 25 minutes, gets a goal, which is crucial. He's been one of their obviously top goal contributors. And now Stuart Armstrong, also supposedly supposed to join the team. He wasn't there for the Dynamo match, so he should be fit to go, you would think, to at least play 45. I don't know if a start is in him yet, but it's possible. But you would expect Galaxy to get back on track. The first spot in the West for them is nowhere near secure because the RSL and LAFC both have an extra game at least, I think, in hand as well. So they still can't afford to slip up. And Whitecaps as well. They are in sixth, but it's such a small gap between that fourth and like even eighth place. So they're not even secure out of like the wild card spot yet. So they still need results. Everyone still needs results, and every point is crucial in especially this mid kind of table of the West for the Whitecaps. So it's gonna be an interesting dynamic of the two styles that are at play here, because both these teams kind of like the ball a lot, but you would expect Galaxy. The health is not the problem for them anymore. Joveljic back, Paintsel off the suspension last game, came back and scored against the Timbers. So I think Galaxy still continues their flawless home form, but it won't be without probably conceding. I'm gonna say Galaxy get it done 3-1. So San Jose officially the first team eliminated from any playoff contention, either East or West, and looking like they're getting that spoon. Pretty sure that's also confirmed. But anyways, they're hosting St. Louis, and St. Louis is in true desperation mode. They need help from Minnesota, obviously, to drop points. But if they were to not win this and Minnesota wins against Kansas City, then both Kansas City and St. Louis City are out. So this is one you literally have to have. It's inexcusable if you don't get it, because this is the worst team in the league. This is the only team worse than you in the West. And St. Louis beat this team at home earlier this season. I think it was 2-0. And St. Louis did have a bye midweek, so they were, I'm pretty sure, at home during let me check here, during last weekend. Yes, they were at home to Minnesota, where they lost, obviously another must-win game, and they had the bye midweek. So not too far of travel here as well. San Jose did play at the Sounders after also playing at the Whitecaps previously. So they're going to be coming back home here off some much heavier legs, and they did do well to come back and draw Sounders midweek 2-2. But still, this team is literally just playing to screw up other teams at this point and playing for pride and really nothing else. They come back home here for one of their final home games. So there's going to be, just generally for them, little motivation besides that. Just trying to screw up St. Louis. So it might be a little bit open here. And, with some of these players, just generally from San Jose's perspective, just generally, playing a little bit more freely, not as tactically, and that could lead to chances on both ends. St. Louis obviously has not won a single away game this entire season, and that's why I'm just simply sticking here with the best bet at their team total over 1.5 for -115. I think it's a great price. This has been a pretty respectable away side in terms of their output this entire season, despite obviously not getting a single win. And just in general, they're middle of the pack in terms of their output season long. Defensively, obviously, can't be trusted, and that's why we're obviously sticking with one side of the ball here. They should be winning this game, but it's definitely going to take more than one goal, because you just can never expect them, especially on the road, to keep a clean sheet. But I'm never going to do something like a both to score here where, you just can't really navigate where the Quakes are. You really shouldn't be trusting them in a certain situation. So despite that, they probably should, you would expect them to probably be able to get one in this match. So, but we're going to stick with this, obviously the better team. They're going to be full strength for this one, well rested, not too far of travel from obviously St. Louis to San Jose. And they've been eyeing this one for the entire week on a normal period of rest. Meanwhile, San Jose has been traveling across, around the West Coast. So I think this is a good price for a very desperate team in what should be a pretty open match, all things considered. Quakes will be looking to play spoiler, but they also won't be just sitting back, especially at home. So this could end up having a lot of goals in it, and I think St. Louis especially should be capable of getting 2 against the worst team in the entire league. So we close out Saturday slate with our 4th best bet, and this is going to be a 2-legger. The second leg is going to be the DC Philly standalone game that is Sunday. But this is RSL versus Timbers in RSL's home field, and we're taking the over 2.5. Keeping it simple, this is one of the highest totals on the board, and for good reason. RSL hasn't been as maybe convincing recently, with some pretty questionable results even in their wins, but their replacements for Gomez, basically one of their top attackers besides Chicho, the replacements, especially the wingers, have been getting more situated game by game. It's been 3 or 4 games now since they came in, and they had a good performance against Dallas to get that win. But in the 3 home games since Leagues Cup for RSL, they've shipped 2 to San Jose in a 2-0 loss, and then just recently now against Dallas, they won 3-2, but shipping 2 goals to Dallas is pretty crazy at home. So definitely a bit of back and forth nature for them there. They haven't held many clean sheets in the past couple months besides the one against New England out of all teams, which is obviously not the most impressive feat. And Timbers on the other end, they're coming in hot off their win against Galaxy. That was a good sign for them, but they're still sitting 8th in the West despite of Bander getting 2 goals, 1 assist in that last game, just continuing his MVP campaign. But he's going to be hard done and probably not get it because of their positioning. So they need to get these crucial points to avoid getting even in those wild card spots. But they could obviously still make a run for 4th. That's just how tight 8th to 4th is right now. But it's all about getting results on the road as well, and that's what's hurt the Timbers, because if you can't do it now, especially at the end of the season, then it's not a good sign entering the playoffs, where if you're going to be in this position, you're going to have to play road games in the playoffs. So it has to be right now for a lot of these teams, obviously, but the Timbers, especially for their front trio, who has just been absolutely lighting it up, they're going to be up for this one. I don't expect too much rotation, and regardless, maybe if a winger like Anthony comes in instead of Moreno, then it's a good problem to have, and really good depth for the Timbers. So Zuparic also out, one of the Timbers center backs, so that only adds to the potential for goals here. I think this one should be a high scoring affair. Normally, I probably still have PTSD from trusting RSL in this reverse fixture when Timbers won 3-0. And so I don't want to get burned by one team here. I just expect both to contribute, but honestly, either one can run away with it, as we've seen. And RSL gets the home advantage here. They're going to be seeking revenge, and I think this is a pretty simple leg. We're going to juice it down a little bit, and this should be a banger game, but I think RSL probably comes out on top if I have to pick a side. So we close out the slate with another juice down over to cap off this final best bet and the second leg of it. We're taking the over 2.5 between Union and DC United. That closes us out at a price of plus 104. And once again, this is one of those totals that is priced at 3.5 normally, and it's justified. DC United's just bolt to score rate has been a complete joke in terms of how often it hits. 6 for 6 out of the last 6 for both to score, 5 out of the last 6 both to score in the over, and before that one game where it didn't earlier on, it's just another huge run of it. Like it's just only a couple outliers where goals are not the case, or both to score especially is not the case for DC United games, home or away. And they're missing even more defenders and who are looking doubtful for this game. And obviously, as you see, the playoff positioning here is dead even. Union just over them, I think, on whatever goal difference or whatever it is. They're both tied on points. Union sitting in that final playoff spot. Union got the 5-1 win over NYCFC midweek, and they don't have much travel, obviously, going back home here. Meanwhile, DC had the bye midweek, so they're going to be on extra rest. Both are going to be up for this game, and for Union's sake, this game is the Sunday standalone game, so they have that extra day of rest, which will be crucial for them. and I think both teams are going to be going for it. Union as well, missing Andre Blake still. Jean Jacques, their defensive mid, hasn't been spotted training in the trainings leading up to the midweek game, so I don't think he would be on course to play this game, which is another big loss. Jack Elliott will be back for this one after missing the NYCFC game, but still, Union, who you would probably say, if you had to pick, are the more cohesive, kind of just generally better run team, still looking thinner in the back. So hard to call a result in this one. Union have been looking better as of late at home, but both should have no problem finding the net. But anyways, regardless, I could see Unions even putting up the 3 themselves if they need to. That's just how open DC United leaves themselves. But I don't think this is one that should get like cagey or anything like that, where these teams abandon their kind of natures to kind of, try and make this low eventful, because there's still 5 games left in the season. I don't think if either of these teams wins and leaves the other in the dust, that that other team is literally in the dust and doesn't have a chance to come back. There's still 4 games after this, but this one obviously means a lot to separate yourself, and I think for that reason there's the potential for just lots of high attacking chances. Benteke is Benteke, and Ty Baribo as well on the other end specifically has just been a man possessed for Philly as they try and get back into the playoffs. So I think the weather should be good, everything should be good. Extra rest for Philly, DC on the bye. I think there's obviously more room for error with us dumbing down this total 1 goal. So I think the spots we've taken overall on this slate have been, I like the angles I'm taking, because there's obviously always the risk of rotation for these games, but Union really doesn't have the luxury of rotating too much, and obviously they're going to get that extra day of rest. So I just don't see that happening, especially with the team they're playing here, how tightly obviously the positioning matters. So once again, I think we've taken the right spots on this slate for goals, and like I said, there's the potential for a lot of disappointments, and I think we've avoided those spots. There's a lot of games we talked about that you could just see rotation specifically hurting those teams, and number 1, the watchability rating of those games, but number 2, just the potential for goals, and it's hard to trust some of these teams coming off shorter rest, and there's a lot of very sketchy matchups, and I think we definitely could have picked worse matchups with less certainty surrounding them. So yeah, I just like where I've kind of picked my spots, and we've come off a good midweek, so yeah, we're going to be looking to keep it up, and that's how we close out with the 2-legger for our 4th and final best bet. Thanks for tuning in again, everyone. I've really been appreciating your consistent support and the love you guys show on the channel. It means the world to me, and if you guys like this video and continue to like it, it just does all the good in the world for the channel. And please make sure to subscribe if you haven't already to the channel, if you've been enjoying the content, and make sure to follow the Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at MLS Digest for more updates, any news surrounding MLS. If you just want to talk about the league or anything, I'm on there. And if you're interested in the betting aspect, probably ahead of Saturday's games, I'll be posting a couple more plays because of the potential lineup congestion and rotation that we expect. So if there's any more spots I want to play depending on the lineups, that'll be on there on Saturday night. But besides that, we have our four best bets. And in terms of this end of the season kind of schedule, most teams have 5 or 6 games left. And even in the midweek, we saw high eventful, high stakes games. So I hope that continues with a lot of these teams still in contention for the playoffs and fighting for specific seeds and positioning at the same time. So yeah, hopefully it just leads to more and more good moments, good action, and of course goals. as we wind down in the season. So we'll see how this weekend slate plays out, but I like the potential for it. And we have, after this slate, on the following Wednesday, the 25th, we have the Canadian Championship between the Whitecaps and Toronto, and then the Open Cup final, LAFC hosting Kansas City, who is really looking to salvage their season. And then after that, we'll be back ahead for week 34 of MLS action for the following Saturday, September 28th. So I'll see you guys ahead of that slate.